Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome back to The Pulse, where we bring you the latest industry news, updates, and new game releases. My name is June, and here are some topics we'll be covering today. Starting us off, we'll be discussing another round of layoffs. Then, we'll be talking about Valve and their legal troubles, followed by some alarming news of the First Descendant. We've also got some coverage of Gamescom and the huge news coming out of that. And of course, to close us out, we'll have new game releases that you should have on your radar. Sit back, relax, and let's dig in. All right, let's talk about the layoffs first. So, Payload Studios, the developers behind TerraTech, has laid off 20% of its workforce. Payload CEO and founder Russ Clark confirmed the news on LinkedIn and said that the cuts are a result of struggles affecting the wider games industry. Clark also stated, "We tried very hard to avoid this, and I won't pretend that we got everything right over the last few years. But ultimately, the games market has been very tough in recent times and shows little sign of getting easier. Small independents like us have no protection from this, other than nailing it every time, which is much easier said than done. TerraTech and TerraTech Worlds will continue to be maintained and developed without interruption. We thank our wonderful community for their support, and we wish the best to those amazing coworkers with whom we have shared this incredible journey, but must now regretfully part ways." This comes at a very unfortunate time, as we've mentioned before in our previous pulses, that layoffs are bound to happen. At the rate that it's going right now is very astronomical. It's mind-boggling as to how many people are now being laid off in the industry itself. A lot of people are speculating that this is because of a economic downturn. Post-COVID contractions are happening, not in just the gaming industry, but it's also happening in other industries as well. There's just a lot of feelings of exploitation of the developers. And then there's, of course, the unionization that's been happening, with Bethesda, that has really gotten people in this really bad mindset. And again, this is not just happening in the gaming industry. I mean, you've probably seen articles or seen news about Amazon, Google, Microsoft, all the big companies doing huge layoffs right now. So, let's throw out some stats out there. So from Statista, a global data and business intel platform, last year, the industry has seen roughly around 11,250 layoffs happen throughout the whole year. Now, this year, from January to June, they're saying there was about 11,000 layoffs, and that's the half of this year. For those of you that have lost your jobs or have been laid off recently, I know it's very discouraging. Keep your head up, keep looking, and we got to keep pushing forward. All right, so let's talk about First Descendant. So at the start of July, two huge free-to-play titles came out, First Descendant being one of them, Once Human being the other. So the First Descendant skyrocketed to about 265,000 concurrent players, but at the beginning, there was just so much controversy being flown out there. For example, the big Destiny icon issue. It turns out that there was icons from Destiny floating about on this website where you can grab icons and things like that. And those were used in the game and edited slightly. Now, the biggest thing there was that Nexon is big enough to hire designers to come up with their own icons and things like that. So them using icons from a third party was just kind of like WTF. And of course, the other controversy being that the drop rates were just not matching up in game, which Nexon is kind of infamous for. So for example, if something was a 30% drop rate, it seemed like it was actually a 3% drop rate, making things to farm very hard. Anyway, so back to the whole concurrent players. So at launch, there was 265,000 players concurrent that I mentioned prior. The game has an average peak of 224,000 players compared to last week, which there was a 73% decline of the player counts. Now, I brought up Once Human. Once Human's average peak was 182,000 players, and in the last 7 days, it's maintained an average peak of roughly about 150,000 players. That's losing around 18%, more or less. So this is pretty alarming for the First Descendant, and the reason being is that Season 1 has yet to start. There's a lot of promotional items out there for Season 1, The Invasion, but a huge slice of the player count dropping like that does not bode well at all for the game. So, and this goes back to the two chief complaints that were out there. The Destiny icon thing doesn't really matter. It's more of the drop rate. I feel as though, as someone who plays the First Descendant, I can understand where the exodus is coming from, I think. So the biggest thing that I had mentioned prior, the drop rates. Those drop rates themselves, 30% does not feel like 30%. 30% feels like 3%. And if you're really lucky with RNG, you'll get what you need, but you have to farm for hours, it seems like. So drop rates aside, Season 1 starts on the 29th of August, meaning that there are changes that will be happening. The patch notes have dropped, and there is some unfortunate news there where there is time-gated content. So the way it seems to be laid out is that there will be 3 separate updates. The first one being on August 29th, and that's when Haley and Haley's skins drop. The Invasion Dungeon comes out, Inversion Reinforcement comes out, Invasion Season Battle Pass, and Ultimate Weapon Excava drop too. So then the second update is September 26th, where you get a new Intercept Battle Deathstalker, new Ultimate Weapon Frostwatcher, new Ultimate Skins, and Ultimate Descendant exclusive spawn effects. Now the third update, which will be in October 30th, Ultimate Freyna and Freyna exclusive story, Ultimate Freyna modification modules, Haley modification modules, new Ultimate modules, and the highest difficulty infiltration operations, and a new vendor. So again, this is time gating a lot of the content that could be probably separated out a little bit better. Again, it doesn't make sense as to why some of this stuff is pushed out. Again, Haley's ice rifle isn't available for a full month after after Haley drops. And then her modules don't come out until 2 months later. I don't understand why they did this, but it's happening. And this is yet again another reason why a lot of players are probably dropping. But again, we have about a week until the game or the season drops. So we'll see if Nexon decides they want to make some changes after hearing a lot of these chief complaints, especially with the time-gated content. All right, and the last bit of the industry news, Valve is getting sued. So Valve is being sued by the UK for £656 million or $843 million. So the UK alleges that Steam uses its dominance in the PC gaming marketplace to shut out competition and overcharge for games. So just so you have all the information and a little bit of background, Vicky Shotbolt of Children's Digital Rights Campaign has submitted this lawsuit through Milberg London, which is the law firm. They accuse Valve of overcharging 14 million PC gamers and abusing its dominant position in the UK. Now, from a quick quote from steamuous.co.uk, companies who hold a dominant position in a market are not allowed to charge excessive or anti-competitive prices. Now, steamuous.co.uk is dedicated to the lawsuit. They also state here, they also cannot impose other unfair trading conditions that prevent or hinder others from competing with them. So this lawsuit also states that Steam's preeminence has enabled Valve to continue charging an excessive commission of up to 30% to game publishers, which in turn results in inflated prices for consumers. Now, Valve's really not a stranger to these antitrust lawsuits. Back in 2023, Valve was sued for $2.73 million for geo-blocking games. Now, if you don't know what geo-blocking is, it's basically where you'll buy a game or some game keys from a different region and then try to activate it in another region and it just doesn't work. So another notable lawsuit was back in 2018 when Steam forked up $2.4 million to Australia for a lack of a refund policy. But that's chump change for a company that has reported earnings of $9 billion in revenue as of 2023. Let's get back to the current lawsuit. The current lawsuit is a collective action, which is essentially a class action suit in that one person represents many. So the next step in this process is waiting for the authorization by the UK's Competition Appeal Tribunal, which, if approved, will be taken to trial. There is currently no date as to when this will take place. Just for comparison's sake, Milberg is also in a similar case that has been authorized, which is a case against Sony back in 2022 that alleges that the company has imposed unfair terms and conditions on PlayStation game developers and publishers, which has resulted in excessive and unfair prices. We'll be sure to keep you updated when we get new news. August 20th kicked off the highly anticipated 2024 Gamescom, a gaming convention hosted in Germany where publishers drop the latest news of their games and provide demos of upcoming titles. Opening Night Live, the showcase that kicks off the 4-day event, was hosted by Jeff Keighley, and like the Summer Game Fest, had some bangers. Here's our list of games that had us excited and warranted a quick shout out. First game, which was also the first game that actually showed up, the trailer actually showed up, was Borderlands 4. It was teased a lot when Randy Pitchford was actually doing promotions for the Borderlands movie. So yeah, it looks like Borderlands 4 will have you blasting across a brand new planet searching for mysterious alien treasure. This is what Pitchford had to say. The team and I at Gearbox have a lot we've wanted to do with Borderlands since we first introduced the looter shooter genre to the world with our original game. All of us at Gearbox have massive ambitions for Borderlands 4 and are putting everything we have into making everything we love about Borderlands better than ever before while taking the game to new levels and exciting new directions. We're looking forward to more information when it comes out. Next up is Call of Duty 6. Alright, so ahead of its release on October 25th, we got a look at the most wanted campaign mission of Black Ops 6. So briefly, the campaign trailer itself is just walking through more of a playthrough of the mission itself. They have you kind of holding a camera, scoping out a place. The point is that you want to get a retinal scan of the senator. And yeah, I mean, it's more of a stealthy mission. There is some action that ends up happening, car chases and things like that towards the end. The biggest takeaway from that trailer or the event itself was that there's two very important dates that you want to take note of. So August 28th will be the Call of Duty Next event. Followed by that, on August 30th, you'll have the MP Open Beta. We'll provide more information once that becomes more available. The next up is Persona 3 and the Reload DLC. There were 2 waves announced during this DLC, which is adding different types of music for players to add to their gameplay, along with a costume set for the team. Wave 3 comes in the form of episode Aegis, the answer, which is the main story's epilogue. A new edition will introduce a challenge that was not possible in previous iterations of Persona 3. Persona 3 will also be adding Persona 5's protagonist, codenamed Joker, as a challenge boss in the game's upcoming DLC. The addition will be part of episode Aegis. So the important date from this is September 10th, which will be the release date. All right, for the Dying Light fans out there, Kyle Crane is making a return after a decade. Voice actor Craig Smith will be returning to reprise his role as Kyle Crane. So this next iteration of Dying Light takes place 13 years after the original game. Basically, we see Crane finally escape the mysterious captors who subjected him to experiments for over a decade. Now, thanks to those experiments, though, he's now infused with zombie DNA, which is basically giving him beast-like powers. So we're pretty much interested in seeing how this changes up the game. And then the next game that we were pretty excited to see was No More Room in Hell 2. So here's a quick synopsis of the game. No More Room in Hell 2 puts players into the shoes of survivors scattered throughout a city. Using their wits, communication, and skills, they must find their fellow survivors and work to get themselves extracted from the undead-infested city. The game will feature proximity chat to facilitate communication. This is essential for immersion and reliable line of communication. Will make it a little bit easier to gather other survivors. So to add to the immersion, they have a permadeath feature which will force players to act like they would in real life. So this seemed pretty cool because now not only do you strategically have to figure out how you're going to survive, but there's actual real consequences for not surviving, which is awesome. All right, and then another game that was pretty important that had an update was Arc Raiders. If you remember back in 2021, they announced that it was going to be a free-to-play title. It is no longer going to be free-to-play. It's going to be $40 up front. And the reasoning that they chose was that it's going to be a premium title. It fits a little bit better with the model, and it gives you a better gaming experience when they do charge the $40 versus free-to-play. So more information on Path of Exile 2, which Harris and I are very excited about. Some pretty big news on that front. So they have announced that there's going to be an early access release on November 15th, 2024. This is a highly anticipated sequel to the popular dark fantasy Diablo-style title that originally launched back in 2013. Originally, Path of Exile 2 was supposed to be an expansion to the original game, the first one, but the studio decided to change it up and make it an actual sequel. A quick summary of what Path of Exile is all about. Path of Exile is an action RPG famed for its intricate combat mechanics and sweeping endgame systems. Players can create specialized builds using numerous skills, looted or crafted gear pieces, and Path of Exile's trademark passive tree to take on various challenges. For fans of Diablo 4, I highly recommend checking out Path of Exile 2. Alright, and then next up is Dune Awakening. So I'm going to be honest here, I watched Dune and I got lost, and I was completely confused as to what the movie was about. I barely got through the second one and realized that I was just as lost. So hopefully, the game turns out to be better and explains things. I'm not sure, but it looked very interesting, and I definitely want to try it out. So the new gameplay trailer itself showed the character creator in early goings of assaulting deserter bases, climbing cliffs, and basic strategies when it comes to like melee combat and shooting mechanics. We also got to see some of the gameplay as to how it would be like building your own base and advantages that come with it, like using blood purifiers to cleanse enemy blood to extract water. This is huge on survival. And here's a little short explainer that was used. You'll go beyond the shield wall to hunt for spice, but this is where you can expect hostile encounters, fighting other players over that spice and spicy emergent PvP battles. Arrakis is a dangerous place, so you can also expect to encounter sandworms regularly while also managing water resources and navigating the harsh environment. The expected launch is sometime in early 2025 on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox, though it looks like the Xbox release will be on a later date. Alright, the next game that pretty hyped about, more so Harris was more hyped up about, was Monster Hunter Wilds. So Monster Hunter Wilds sees players joining a special research commission investigating an area called the Forbidden Lands. The Scarlet Forest is a newly revealed part of that Forbidden Lands and features lush greenery combined with crimson waters. Like many other areas that was shown, it's dynamic, shifting between periods of plenty, acclimacy, and fallow, which impact the landscape and the wildlife. So I'm going to end up butchering this type of monster, but one of the new monsters that was shown off in the Scarlet Forest was Lala Barina, part of the series' rare class of monsters. So if I were to describe this monster, it'd be a type of monster that had sharp limbs and can unfurl into a rose-like thing. Meanwhile, each region in the game has its own apex predator. The apex predator of the previously revealed Windward Plains is Flying Wyvern Ray Dao. So this monster has specifically adapted to the region's dusty grassland and can unleash powerful electric strikes. So there wasn't a definitive date on the release date, but it looks like sometime in 2025 for PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox. Alright, and the next one that kind of caught our eye was obviously Civ 7. Now, so for the first time in franchise history, you're not going to have the ability to mix and match leaders and civilizations to build the empire of your wildest dreams. So The Verge actually had the opportunity to test out the game and talk with its developers, and they explained it as kind of interesting. Their 3-hour demo wasn't enough time to get a feel for how well the leaders in different civilizations work together. But they did have positive things to say for that type of gameplay, the switch up in being able to do that. It's interesting that they're doing this because in previous Civ games, most civilians were actually tied to a specific leader who was usually, not always, a noteworthy head of state. So in previous Civs, there were iterations where you could have multiple leaders for Civs, and a couple of occasions where there were actually one leader that could actually, take over or lead one set of Civs. A good example of this would be England and France, where Queen Eleanor was the queen of both countries. So yeah, there's a slight trickle of information coming through for Civ 7. Those of you that are very excited for Civ 7, keep your ears out. We'll be following that very closely here at GameWave. All right, next up is Delta Force Hawk Ops. Now, interesting thing about Delta Force Hawk Ops, they have actually changed the name of the game. It is no longer going to be Delta Force Hawk Ops. It'll be just Delta Force. Currently, Delta Force is actually in alpha testing, and it's been in alpha testing for a couple of months. The game has actually been doing very well. A lot of people have taken to the game very well. They believe that it's going to be a true competitor to DICE's Battlefield. Team Jade has been diligently updating the alpha since it kicked off. They recently added more content. And yeah, everything seems to be going very well with Delta Force. As for the full release, the plan has always been for that to occur in the first quarter of 2025. But since it's been doing relatively well, everyone's just waiting for the early access to be released. Outside of its very Battlefield-like multiplayer mode, there is rumor that there is going to be a single-player campaign that's inspired by the movie Black Hawk Down. Do note that if there is going to be a campaign, this will not be free. But, we don't have much information on that yet. So when that comes through, we'll definitely let you know. All right, and that's going to wrap up our Gamescom coverage. If there are any games that we missed or any games that you want to bring to light, put them down in the comments. Next up, your new releases. And that's a wrap on the Pulse. Be sure to join us on our socials for the latest updates. We also promised some changes, and they're still coming. The team and I are buttoning up some last minute details, and we'll be sure to let you guys know. Thanks for watching. See you next time.